Welcome back, everybody, to our energy tips for week 17 and also a little bit week 16. I mentioned this in the energy update. I recorded a super long update last week, and then I noticed that it was without audio, so I got a little too frustrated with all these energies going on last week. So here you go. This is going to be a little longer than normal. I hope you guys got all right through the last week. We are in the middle of a hodgepodge of intense energies here that want to ignite. So last week was all this testing and synchronizing and checking out where our boundaries are. And this week that is coming in here with this Easter weekend to come brings in the ignition, brings in the direct experience of pressure cooker. So if you felt that last week was already tricky for you, for this coming week here, you're gonna have to stay focused. You're gonna have to stay on target. And let's look at what this target is. All right, what I recommend you guys to pay attention to. There's a larger theme, a larger collective theme going on, and I've mentioned this in the forecast for 2019 and also in the forecast for April. And that is the war of the churches, like a religious war that comes from a deep unresolved karmic conflict. And these 2 weeks here, 16 and 17, so starting with last week, the tragic event at the Notre Dame, which delivered a lot of pictures, a lot of visuals of full-on destruction, but at the same time also this immediate in-stream of money, of donations, of people willing to rebuild. So I want you guys to keep this in the back of your minds, because this is really, really important. We're starting to see, probably with this weekend, that's why I included the 19th, since the full moon energies are very, very potent, very, very strong, and the Easter weekend as this sort of ignition type of weekend here for us will bring in a lot of that spiritual warfare, if you will. Okay, so when you look at the deeper context of things that are going on, and not just in your personal lives, not just in, the political and financial, and I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I want to point this out because I'm looking deeper. I'm looking underneath those conspiracy theories. What is all this about? What is this fight of dark and light? What is this all about? This week is really good to gain some more clarity about this, because you're going to see this challenged. You're going to see this in danger. All right. The spiritual warfare that we are experiencing here in the larger context has to do with duality. And here in transCODES, we talk a lot about the ego and transcending the duality of the ego for a good reason, because that's really your only insurance policy to not get pulled into the collective karma. And collective karma is something that basically, the collective unconscious, is a field that the collective unconscious produces. It's a culmination of all our energies together here on this planet, with past, present, and future. And that draws us into the resolution of karma. Karma wants to be undone. Remember, there's no good or bad karma. There's only a lot of karma or not so much karma. And our goal is to not have any karma. Why? Because when we can transcend karma, we don't have to live or relive this karmic wheel of things. And those of you who who were raised in strong collective and family structures, okay, that gave you a lot of restrictions, you guys know really well what I'm talking about. No matter how aware you are, no matter how well you understand all this intellectually, it's really, really difficult to break free from these repetitions. And so on a collective level, guys, this spiritual warfare that I mentioned doesn't have anything to do with fighting demons. It has something to do with understanding what created the duality in the first place. Now, we all have a physiology here in 3D that is more or less tied to linear processes, and I talk about neurotransmitters and neurology and DNA and so forth, but none of that is set in stone, guys. And so there is the chance for us to out-vibrate all of this if we can let go of duality. And duality in a spiritual sense was brought in through the churches, through the religions, by taking out the third part that can be seen in the energetic. In the energetic, we can see that there is a triune energy, that there is a mother, father, and a child, the creation that comes out of the union, out of the hero's gamas. But in our societies and in our churches, this third part has been eliminated. And that third part is femininity. That has nothing to do with, again here, emancipation or anything like that. It has something to do with taking away the middle part, the part that brings in the balance, that can show us the third option. And I really want you guys to maybe reflect on this a little bit. The third option, guys, is what can help you to out-vibrate, to transcend duality. Life is not just black and white. Life is not just if you're not for me, then you're against me. Life is not about which team you belong to or how much better you are. Life is about finding the balance, finding the third option. And this needs to happen here on a collective level. And the way this happens is through bringing the feminine component on an energetic level back into the play field. And this is basically the roadmap for us to out-vibrate collective karma. We have to bring in the softness. We have to bring in that which can allow us, to know what to do when we are pulled either here or there through our ego. It's the nurturing, it's the self-care, it's the self-love, it's the compassion, the forgiveness, and understanding, not the positionalizing of things, but the understanding, the true understanding. So this wants to come in here. It's an elevated level of clarity. And without this third component, we will forever basically be trapped in light or dark, good guys, bad guys, God and the devil. And that is an artificial condition. We were told that this is it. We were told that this is the way it is. And for those of us with energetic perception, it becomes obvious that that is not the case. Right? So we're talking about a really, really big transformation that is happening here. That is way beyond just the financial, the political, environmental, social aspects that we are dealing with nowadays. It has to do with our spiritual freedom. It has to do with us understanding things from this witnesser position, this third position. So let's look at the energy centers that are involved here for this week. We have our second chakra being triggered. That is where our emotions are stored. And because it kind of comes from underneath, guys, it's all underneath, okay? Our core stuff will be triggered, but not the karmic stuff that comes here then in week 18. It is more, or was there in 16. It is more the stuff that we've been repressing. So this week has a lot of repression and release type of dynamics, okay? So, and it will go in waves, maybe a couple of times a day even. where you feel really, really annoyed and you've had it. I called it fed upness. I didn't find a better word for this. Or where you feel really, really anxious. Where you feel really, really painful, where everything that you see feels like completely disillusioned and you feel powerless. And these emotions, these perceptions are all real, but they're not necessarily based on truth. So when this comes in, yes, when this triggers your core issues, always look at where you have been repressing, where you have not allowing yourself to express your true feelings. And then also look at the parts that you have taken on as self-imposed restrictions. That's really, really important. Spiritual freedom, guys, expresses in our free will. And yes, there is a conspiracy aspect to this, but maybe it's just a natural way of controlling this large number of people. You take a few options away, so you keep them, basically busy with just fighting against poverty or fighting against a neighbor or, wanting to get more money. So this whole sort of greed, consumerism that is being triggered in us through our second and third chakra, guys, that is what needs to be transcended, not to live in poverty and give everything away. That's not the point. The point is the third option. What's the third option? The third option is sharing, resource sharing, mutually working things out instead of fighting against another, instead of comparing, competing, conquering. Okay. And for this, we need a spiritual understanding. We can't just do this based on our physiology, because our physiology binds us to duality. Okay? So this is the complexity of our second chakra that comes in. And we, at the same time, and this is actually a very, very beautiful constellation, have our fourth chakra, that's our heart. That's the softness that wants to come in conjunction with our sixth chakra. That's our third eye vision. That's our ability to see truth, to see beneath, to go beyond. And this can, for those of us who are already seeing the third option, who are already calling shots, who are already aware of their power, who are already aware that they have free choice, who know that it's all about making conscious decisions at each and every moment. For those, this can be a really beautiful week. But I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of, annoyance in the game still. So we have to filter what we let in. We have to make sure that we don't expose ourselves too much. We can't really run away from our own darkness, guys. We have to know our own darkness. I explained this in the energy update. Or else you just telegraph your shit magnets and literally ask for absorbing other people's energies. Okay? So the constellation is actually a beautiful constellation. But we need to make this conscious. So everything has to be released now. And the reason why I call this forced cleanse is we're getting really, really pushed to our boundaries now. And indecision and things that are sort of in wishy-washy, or were you trying to hide your part, or are unwilling to look at your own shadow aspect in that, will all pull you deeper, and they will not be able to sustain. In other words, they have to come out. So naturally, my suggestion for you is go full frontal. Work with your shadow. Know your darkness. What is darkness, guys? Darkness is the illusion that comes in through the ego, that we are separated from Source, from God. And yes, there is this Luciferian aspect to that, because it triggers this abandonment in us. It triggers this getting or having been kicked out of heaven type of feeling in us. And it can go either way. We can go into powerlessness with it, or we can go into trying to make our way back into heaven. And that's where this false redemption aspect comes in, that I did talk about last week, but that didn't get recorded. So physically, guys, it's really important for you that you focus on your physical, that it stays in a good position, because you know, like I've pointed out so many times, if your physical goes low, everything else goes low. Okay, so make sure you stay balanced. Whatever works for you. We talked a little bit about this in the energy update. Stimulate your lymphatic system. Help all your release systems to let all these toxins out, toxic energies, toxic emotions, toxic people if you have to, you know, but on whatever level, make sure that on your cellular level you have enough sleep, you drink enough water, and so forth, so that your system can actually metabolize this correctly. Emotionally, you're going to have to deal with this fed upness, with this powerlessness, and with your anxiety, okay? There's no way around this. So you're going to have to work with, you know, the payoff that you get out of staying where you're at. There's no other way. Or else you will telegraph that and you'll continue absorbing things. So become aware of what affects you. Because what affects you is showing you what you absorb. Mentally, intellectually, what I mentioned earlier as far as like the collective impulse that is coming in here, it's important that you understand that this is not about your intellectual, conceptual understanding. This is about your deeper understanding. And that requires you to move beyond judgment, beyond opinion, beyond vilifying darkness. Whether it's, you know, this group or that group, or it doesn't matter. When you vilify others, you put yourself into a position. You judge, and you are locked on to duality. Spirituality allows you to contextualize things from a different perspective. It brings in that third option, guys. And so my tip for you, not just for this coming week, but this is a really, really good week to get this started. Learn, discuss, exchange, really work with other people. Go into this mutual place with others. And most importantly, stop the indecision that you have. This is one of your biggest energy leaks, and you have to call shots. Okay, I'm not saying like going out on the street and rebelling or anything like that, but you have to call shots. You know, if you really hate your job, what are you waiting for? If you're really unhappy in your relationship, then address it. Or let it be, accept it. Lower your expectation. If you're considering to do something, or to you know, maybe go on a trip or whatever, and you can't decide and goes back and forth, call a shot, guys. Do not allow that to leak out your energy, to drain your energy. Do not allow that. Stop competing with others. Stop comparing. Stop, you know, this like comparing your misery. This is like really, this is what annoys me right now. It's like, oh, my life is so hard. Oh no, my life is much harder. And also the resentments that we foster through this. Telling each other how hard our lives are is not going to change anything, guys. Therefore, socially, you're going to have to work with your annoyance a bit here, because, you know, you don't want to get into too many fights. It's not really a good week for that, simply because everybody is in such a tense place, okay? And the thing with, you know, these outbursts, you know, where you repress, and then explode, is that they build karmic debt, okay? So you don't want to add to your karma. That's very, very important. And you don't want to feel guilty all the time either. That's very important too. So that's what I'm saying. Don't do the wishy-washy stuff. And if you lash out and, you know, you hurt other people's feelings, then go back and say, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. It didn't come out right. I'm not in a good place. I need more space. But one thing that really came to my attention this week is parenting. parenting has a lot to do with our values and with our opinions. And you've got to, if you are a parent, really keep a close eye on this. Remember, all the narcissists that everybody complains about, somehow they had to be made, right? So parenting plays a big role in this replication of karma. And there's one thing I noticed here with our younger parents is that we, want to do everything right. We have these spiritual values. We have, these ideas that we have to be permissive. We have to give our kids all choices. But guys, that's toxic, just so you know. I don't have the time to explain this here. We did workshops about this, but you have to give your kids clear boundaries. Not opinions, not values, boundaries. And don't project your own stuff onto your kids. Just because you always used to do this or you used to see it that way doesn't mean your children do. These kids that are incarnating here right now, they bring in a very clear task. They know why they're here. If you raise your children without clear boundaries, you are breeding narcissists. Okay? Because our society, the collective here, is a breeding ground for narcissism right now. So you're going to have to be very conscientious about this and call shots. Do you know if it's the right shot or not? No, you don't. You never do. It's not important. Embrace making mistakes. You're going to make mistakes anyway. But, make conscious decisions. You can always correct them. Correction means that you're growing. But sitting there and being afraid that you're screwing up your 1-year-old by telling it no, that means that there's a piece missing in you, and that is that you're not understanding here that a child cannot make decisions, cannot make conscious choices. It takes about 15 years. And by 15, they think they can, but they still can't. So there's a reason why our legal systems, make our young adults, legal adults at 18 or 21. Because up until then, they cannot see the larger context, okay? And that's your job here as parents. Remember the higher goal, all right? And don't be afraid of confrontation, because the fear of confrontation is what got you here in the first place. And I want to say one more thing, because we're going to have a workshop, the third out of 6 workshops here at transCODES this Sunday night, Empath, narcissist workshops about narcissistic parenting. Codependency and narcissism is a sliding scale. It's the same scale, all right? So I want you to understand that, especially when you're a parent. Spirituality, guys, is the big topic here for the next 7-8 years. So we will all realize that this part that was cut out in our scientific paradigm, in our social paradigm, namely to understand politics, collective development, even financial developments and so forth, from the larger context. And guess what? When you see it from larger context, you don't need conspiracy theories, because you understand why things have to be in a certain way. Not to, to suck them up or whatever, but you decide if you want to participate in this or not. So understand that from a spiritual point of view, the duality is the fight for your soul. And the only way to win that fight is to step out of duality. Okay? Any kind of abuse, any kind of repression of that freedom leads to toxicity, leads to all these phenomena that we see in our society today. Narcissism being one of them. And, stepping into this third option in a spiritual sense means understanding that free will is your power. Even though we have karma, but karma is something that binds you to dualism. If you step out, you don't have to be in it. You have to work, of course, for this sort of redeeming aspect of it, which is the shadow work, which is, the inner child work that we do. We work through these things, that these shit magnets that we have that keep pulling us into our trauma, that keep, re-traumatizing us. But it's your choice to let go of that. And shadow work is what delivers the answer as to what you're getting out of this. So energetically, one more time here, it is the larger scope of working with our masculine and feminine energies, bringing them together so that we realize that creation, divine creation, is actually part of us. And for as long as we're in this training, in this learning phase, we're going to have to use our absorption and our projection as navigator. You have to look at, what it is that you absorb the most, and then what it is that you project the most. Okay. I called this telegraphing your shit magnets in the energy update. And for those of you who are working with us, we're strongly recommending to do regular self-clearing, to develop your personal self-clearing ritual. Okay, so that whenever something comes on, that you can sort of get rid of it right away before the shit magnet aspect of that gets triggered in you, before it can latch on. So that's the trick here, guys, for next week. I have a little extra piece that I've recorded for you last week, and that is about adverse childhood experiences and how they create these shit magnets in us. Not to say that the parents are the ones to blame, but to show you the level of trauma that you have and how much that actually influences your energy. I'm wishing you a wonderful week, and I hope that you can step out of this dualism and step into your free will. Thank you guys for supporting transCODES. Thank you all heart warriors for being there. I see you next week. Bye-bye. Hello everybody, welcome back to our Empaths series here, concepts for energetically sensitives and empaths. My name is Jona Bryndis, and I'm a professional energy healer and energy coach. And I'm going to introduce to you in a structured way what some of these concepts are that we are in need of understanding a little better, to contextualize better what is going on when we talk about energetic sensitivity. Today I want to cover the topic adverse childhood experiences and how it comes that so many of us energetically sensitives and empaths are suffering from a massive trauma load. How come that so many of us experience all these really traumatic things so early in our lives that we are forced to resort to our energetic sensitivity? I want to shed some light into this, and what I'm going to cover here is how we are being set up for certain things. We are being set up, of course, through some of the karmic stuff that we bring in, and that comes in through our family karma, that comes in through the need for our personal evolution here as a true self on this 3D plane in this lifetime. And how does all this happen? It happens through, this early conditioning, this early programming, and the early exposure that we have. So if you will, and I know this is a kind of unique way of looking at it, but if you will, the best way for our karma to come through and teach us the lessons that we need to learn in order to undo our trauma, to let go of our trauma, is to have all these adverse childhood experiences so that we can go through this and fast forward. So let me cover some of these most common ACEs, as they are called in the psychological and medical community, and what this means to you when you find that you have a lot of these early childhood or adverse childhood experiences. So if you want to know what sets you up for specific physical pains, for specific experiences, sometimes even for mental illnesses, then at least the medical and the psychological professionals will look at your early childhood exposure. Okay, and there are some factors here, 10 factors that are typically counted as factors influencing sort of your propensity to come up with specific diseases or illnesses. But also, decision making, whether you might be a risk taker, whether you might develop criminal tendencies, even, all the way to like sociopath and psychopathic or neurotic behavior. Okay, so the higher the score of your childhood trauma, the stronger the impact on your neurotransmitters and your physiology. And why is that? Because every time we experience trauma, our autonomous nervous system responds to it, without us being aware of it, in this fight, flight, freeze, or submit type of way. But for the most part, what it does to us is it predispositions our physical to go into certain places. And there's something like personality, of course, where some of us are more on the aggressive, on the extrovert side, and some of us are more on the submissive, on the introvert side. Okay, so some of that can also be mixed. But the main point being here that the stronger the impact on your neurology, the stronger the impact on your immune system, on even your genetic expression. Okay, you all know that, just because you have the gene for something doesn't mean that it has to come to an expression in this lifetime. But this is where karma kind of replicates. That is through our DNA. And many of you know this when we do energetic tune-ups and when we do energetic, especially the collective clearings, I work with your mitochondrial DNA because that's where your trauma is stored. Okay. Now, what does it affect? It affects, of course, how you experience your life, how you contextualize things that happen in your life, how you see yourself in this. And it can go all the way to your life expectancy and also how you deal with changes altogether. So some of the collective things that we're seeing here is due to these shifts and changes that happen in our societies, is that we have a higher tendency right now to ADHD. We have a higher tendency towards narcissism. We have a higher tendency towards bipolarism, where people have these like really extreme mood swings, such as borderline stuff, where it's very, very difficult for them to regulate themselves. And this plays directly into this global awakening with all these energetically sensitives and empaths now also showing up in increased numbers, which is sort of the overall intensity level of our perception is increasing. And this is why we need to look at some of these adverse circumstances of our childhood and how they impacted us, because they contribute to the toxic stress that we are absorbing on a day-to-day level. And many of you already know this, that when you are in a really bad place energetically, it's really difficult for you to respond to changes or challenges in your life in a positive way. It's very difficult, to stay optimistic, for instance, or it can be very challenging for you to deal with simple things in life, such as, your job or your children and so forth. So the main thing here to understand is that the reason why we need to look into our childhood and childhood trauma is not because of the content of it, the actual stuff that happened, is because of the composition that we have attracted here in our lifetime, because all these individual factors compound. They compound into what we call your trauma load, and what you could, in common language, express as your shit magnets. Okay, this is where your energy system is most susceptible to get affected, to absorb, and also to develop behaviors that actually make it worse, rather than help you to deal with this. Okay, so let's look at some of these factors here. There's 10 factors that are defined by the CDC. And then there is one extra factor that I want to add here for us energetically sensitives and empaths. One general aspect is, of course, the exposure to any type of visual, any type of experience, any type of extreme and intense energy in your life. That is a general aspect of adverse childhood exposure, simply because, especially before the age of 5, where your brain finally develops the ability to contextualize things and to see things as a concept, to say, oh, this is only a dream, oh, this is only a movie, and so forth. Until then, all this gets stored without filter. Okay, so everything that you've seen on TV, the shows, the video games, what other people say, what other people talk about, even if it doesn't affect you, that you've heard and seen before the age of 5, is stored in you. And your subconscious does not know that it's not you, or that it's not about you. So it takes that as your own. That's a big one, guys. A big one to understand, especially if you have children. Okay, factor number 1 as your ACE score is if you've been exposed to a lot of swearing, insulting, humiliating, threatening around you. Okay, so basically, if there were people around you that used a really sort of violent language, verbal abuse can play into this. Even for an energetically sensitive, being shunned for the things that you see, that you feel, or how you see them. Factor number 2, you have been pushed around, you have been grabbed, you've been physically threatened, okay? Or you've been observing other people being pushed, being grabbed a lot when you were a child. All of these ACE, these adverse childhood experiences, count for the time from 0 till 18. Number 3, you've been exposed or participated in inappropriate sexual behavior. Now, for most of us, this is more of a forced exposure, and this can even mean like you've watched porn or inappropriate sexual scenes on TV when you were little, but also fondling. And of course, this whole big cluster of sexual trauma counts here too, this factor number 3. Factor number 4, you had extreme feelings of separation growing up, loneliness, where you felt nobody loves you, nobody understands you, you're not important, you have no significance, you have nothing that you can contribute. ACE factor number 5, you weren't really taught or modeled good self-care. You don't really know what it means to take good care of yourself. Often actually, all the way to not even learning that you have to brush your teeth every day, that you have to have, personal hygiene, but also, to eat right, and what it means to grow up in a sheltered, clean environment, where there's, where there's a lot of dirt, a lot of clutter, and where you don't really feel safe, where you don't really feel protected. ACE factor number 6 is when your parents were too checked out to be there for you, when there was like negligence or even abandonment, when they weren't really able to do the basics for you. And often also in conjunction, of course, with substance. So substance abuse then is the factor number 7. If you've been exposed to people who take drugs or alcohol or even medication, and this was part of your life growing up, that counts as an adverse childhood exposure. Number 8, if you went through divorce or separation growing up, even a very traumatic loss of, like, say, your best friend, or your grandparents dying, that's all sort of part of the natural circle of life if it happens, due to age. But if there are things that happen, such as your neighbor gets shot or your best friend gets killed in an accident, those are severe adverse childhood experiences. Number 9, if you went through a phase of depression and perhaps even suicidal thoughts, if you were surrounded by people who are very depressed or suicidal. And guys, this actually also counts the parent, that was even perhaps mentally ill, or that had to deal with lots of ups and downs that you had to witness as a child, where you perhaps had to start taking care of your parent because they weren't able to function due to that. And number 10 is if you've observed any type of criminal activity, incarceration, if you had a parent in prison, for instance, if this was part of your life growing up, then you have adverse childhood experiences and with it an increased trauma load, which can then lead to massive physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic setups, okay, and problems. And number 11, that's a special one here for empaths and energetically sensitives. And that has to do with narcissistic parenting. That has to do with, seeing the child as the extension of the parent. The parent sees the child as the extension of him or herself, or of that family cult that they are trying to maintain. And that does not allow you to develop your own sense of self. I'm adding this to the ACE factors because, especially amongst us energetically sensitives and empaths, this number is growing rapidly. People who are realizing that they have been raised by parents where it was all about them and their needs, and where you weren't allowed to express your needs, to even voice them, to even have needs, and where you were basically conditioned to please your parents, to please the image or the false self, or the family spirit, if you will, the family legacy as your priority, because this can lead to severe other aspects that will attract all these factors, these other 10 factors that we just talked about. I hope this illuminates a bit more why so many of us are on this, sliding scale here between really strong inner child wounds, difficulties dealing with reality, and really strong empathy that seems to make it even worse because we keep absorbing other people's energies. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked it. Please share this video and push the like button. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.